So good afternoon and welcome to our fourth webinar in our summer series. This webinar is on customers with physical disabilities. MTM is very pleased to host this webinar series, and we're happy to introduce our presenters, Kristen Ryan and Chanel Houston. If you have any questions, for our presenters, please use the chat feature in the top right corner. You'll see chat, and you'll also see a Q&A button. You can use either of those features. If you use the chat feature, please make sure you direct any of your questions to myself, Nathan Graeff. That's Nathan Graeff. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the MTM website shortly after, probably tomorrow. And it's www.mtm-inc.net. And if you would like an accessible version of this information or the webinar, please email me. My email is N as in Nathan, Graeff, Graeff, that's two F's like French fry, at mtm-inc.net. And now I'd like to turn this over to Kristen.
I'm Kristen Ryan. I'm an occupational therapist at MedStar National Rehabilitation Hospital in Washington, D.C. I'm going to start by introducing what is a physical disability. So as it says, it's any limitation in a person's physical functioning. Some of the impairments may include impairments in mobility, endurance, or dexterity, so a person's ability to use their hands. These disabilities may be as a result of a congenital defect from birth, or may be acquired later in life, maybe from an accident or some other event that has caused a physical disability. Some other types of disabilities may include any type of vision or hearing impairment. Here in Washington, D.C., we have valued at university, so we have a larger community of people with hearing impairments, so they may be using public transportation regularly to get around the city. Some physical disabilities may also be as a result of any sleep disorder, fatigue, pain, or seizures. I have worked with a number of people who have had some sort of, whether it be weakness in their arms or some other part of their body as a result of seizures. Next slide. Here's a list of just, a short list of various types of physical disabilities, including spinal cord injuries, brain injuries that can either be acquired, such as through a stroke or maybe an aneurysm, also traumatic brain injuries, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, arthritis, amputations, cerebral palsy, spinal bifida, muscular dystrophy, ALS. I mean, the list could go on of any type of physical disability a person, or any type of illness or something that a person may have that could result in a physical disability. Next slide. In the United States, about 35.2 million adults have a physical disability, and that's about 15% of the population of adults. And then a disability can also be classified as difficulty with one basic daily function, and that can be about 33% of adults in the United States, or about 75.4 million adults. Next slide. This was huge.
So, hello, my name is Chanel Houston, and I am a peer mentor at the National Rehabilitation Hospital in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to go over some limitations and barriers for persons with disabilities using public transportation. And we'll get into some details later on in the presentation. But these barriers include distance to travel to public transportation, accessible pathways to and from your public transportation, maneuvering mobility devices on or off buses and trains, long wait times for public transportation, and then also elevator and escalator outages in train stations where trains are located up or downstairs can present barriers for folks with physical disabilities. Next slide. Some accommodations to consider as it relates to persons with physical disabilities in public transportation are asking an individual with a physical disability if they need help before providing help, for example, pushing their wheelchair for them or reaching for their hand or arm to guide them. You want to ask before just helping there. And not sitting in or blocking accessible or priority seating on public transportation or at a bus stop. Allowing an individual with a disability to board the bus or train first. A lot of times persons with physical disabilities who use a wheelchair or other mobility device need room to get situated in the priority seating or in the wheelchair space. And if others are standing in that space, it makes it difficult for the person with their mobility device to maneuver into that area. And then the other thing to remember is to not touch or lean on an individual's mobility device without asking first. Even if you think you are helping that person in any way, you could be getting in their way of getting around or even throw their balance off by leaning on them in any way. Next slide.
Okay, so we're going to go through and answer the questions. So the first one is, when working with an individual who has a physical disability, what is the proper terminology to remain respectful? One thing to keep in mind with individuals with physical disabilities, you always want to refer to the person, not the disability. So for example, I want to be referred to as my name, you know, just like you would any of your other friends or family members. And then maybe later on when speaking with them saying, oh, and she has a spinal cord injury, or oh, she has a brain injury that resulted in weakness in one of her arms. So always thinking of them as a person, not as their disability. Next slide.
Okay, so question number 2, what are physical or perceived barriers to an individual who has a physical disability within the community setting, and then also on public transportation? So within the community, barriers include lack of curb cuts or items in a pathway, for example, trees, steps, utility poles. These items present a challenge for the person with a disability to get where they need to go. In particular, the ability to cross the street and navigate through an intersection using a wheelchair or other device can be challenging without curb cuts or with an item in the middle of your pathway that you have to somehow get around, or even if there is construction in a particular area where you're unable to get from one side of the street to the other. And then physical barriers as it relates to public transportation. These things can include the distance one must travel to get to the desired stop or station without a lot of walking or wheeling in their wheelchair, given the potential to tire easily if the person with disabilities has to travel a long distance or up a big hill to reach the desired destination. All of these barriers can deter persons with disabilities from wanting to use public transportation, especially by themselves. Next slide.
Question 3, what are some tips, tricks, or tools you can find helpful when working with an individual who has a physical disability within the community setting and on public transportation? So I work mostly with people who are in inpatient rehab, so they're relatively new to, you know, navigating life with a physical disability. We do take people on community outings, so I've had some experience with people in the community setting as well as on public transportation. So you're teaching them just how to navigate this huge system of public transportation. So that could be things like calling ahead to check on elevator outages because you may need to avoid that station, or you know, you might not be able to transfer between different points depending on the elevator outages, teaching them how to get on and off a metro train, that they're getting on and off near the front of the metro train so that the conductor can see them getting on and off so the doors don't close on them while they're trying to get on and off the train. Same thing with the bus, how to get on and off the bus, you know, teaching them how the bus is going to, what we call kneel down or lower to the ground, so, and then the ramp will come down so that they can get onto the bus. Educating them about some of the accessibility features on the bus, tie-downs on the bus, so that way they're aware, you know, the bus driver might help them get in, hooked into the bus, but they still should be aware of what's available to them while they're on the bus. And also teach them to be patient when you're navigating the public transportation system, especially with a new physical disability. It can take a lot longer to get from one place to the other as you're finding the elevators, as you're navigating around. So it just takes some extra time to get from point A to point B when you're traveling. And one thing too, in working with some individuals, especially if they've been living with their physical disability for an extended period of time, they know best, they know how you know, things work for them. So you always want to check with them with what they might need assistance with, so that they can direct you and tell you what they can have help with or what they're able to do on their own, and being independent in the community. And Chanel, if you have anything to add, go ahead and jump in with this question.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to also touch on some of those items in the last two questions. So question number 4, we can go to the next slide. What are some safety concerns to be aware of when working with an individual who has a physical disability within the community, and then also on public transportation? So some safety concerns within the community for persons with a disability include the person's lack of stability or balance in a wheelchair, or even as they're using a different mobility device or a cane when traveling within the community, as it relates particularly to uneven pathways or small walkways that they have to get through. A small area could be a tight clearance, causing the person with a disability to have to try and maneuver their way to wherever they're getting, wherever they need to go. And they're trying to get through on a sidewalk with a building on one side, and then you have a street or a curve or a ledge on the other side. And this could cause that person with disability to potentially fall, or even fall off the sidewalk into traffic or in the street. And safety concerns as it relates to public transportation include maneuvering uneven steps between the train and the platform, which we see a lot here on the transit system in Washington, D.C., and also the sometimes large and unpredictable gap or space between the train and the platform where you're waiting also presents a safety issue. This can lead to potentially getting stuck in that space, you know, with your wheelchair, your wheels get stuck, or in the doorways, causing the person with the disability to fall, or even worse, fall out of their chair altogether, especially if they're traveling alone. Next slide, please. So Kristen and I are both going to go over this question, so I'll just go ahead and start. So question number 5 is, do you have a specific example of a situation involving an individual who has a physical disability that did not go as expected? How did you handle the situation, and what would you do differently or suggest others do instead? So I have an example of a situation that didn't go as expected. I use both the trains and buses here in Washington, D.C., and as a wheelchair user, trying to get into or out of the train station, which has steps, and an elevator that's out of service, presents an issue. I either can't get out of the station, or I can't get into the station because of these steps and the elevator being out of service, and a lot of the stations only have one elevator. So having this happen now several times, I've learned a few things. One, to ask the station manager for help on getting to the next station by bus or taking the train to the next station to get where I need to go. 2, planning ahead, as Kristen mentioned before, by checking online for the elevator outages so you know how to plan ahead and know that your route may change. And then 3, knowing the train system and the major bus routes that service the area I frequently visit helps for me to plan in these times where I'm kind of stuck in the station or I can't get to the station I need to get into. So Kristen, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing to keep in mind, like Jill and I have both mentioned, is the planning ahead. A couple of years back, myself and a recreation therapist here at NRH luckily only had one patient with us, but we decided we're going to use public transportation. It was one of his first times out of the hospital, and we decided to go to Union Station. And, you know, we took the bus down to Union Station, but where the bus had to stop that day was this like cobblestone brick stop. So the patient wasn't going to be able to wheel himself. So myself and the other therapist, you know, we had to do a little bit more probably than we would have liked to in assisting this individual, just because it would have been so unsafe for him to manage his wheelchair over, you know, a cobblestone pathway, and then managing all the people and the sidewalk and the curb cuts. And on top of that, it also decided to start raining at that moment. So just planning ahead, you know, checking the weather, knowing your bus routes. I think if we had done a little bit better job planning the bus route and where it was exactly going to let out, we would have had an easier time getting on and off the bus, or maybe just getting off the bus at a different stop where maybe we knew the sidewalk or the bus stop would have been a little better, and then kind of backtracked over to Union Station. And like Chanel said too, you know, sometimes with the metro buses, you can have a large gap in between the platform and the train, so you really have to be careful and teach individuals how to manage that gap, asking for assistance as needed, because it can be a safety concern for people in the community using metro buses or trains, rather.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Kristen and Chanel. There is contact information on the screen for Chanel and Kristen, so if anybody has any questions, concerns, or comments, they can go ahead and share them with Chanel and Kristen via the email. We will have a time at the end. We will have a time right now for questions. So please a reminder, if you have a question, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature in the top right corner. So if you're calling in, please also try to use the chat feature, the Q&A feature. It does help us to make sure we have all the questions answered. And direct those questions to me, Nathan Gray, through the chat feature. Kristen and Chanel, we do have a few questions already, so just want to see if you wouldn't mind answering these. So one of them is, in rehab hospitals, do therapists ever help with learning how to use public transportation first? And I think Kristen, you might have alluded to that a little bit.
Yeah, and I work on the inpatient side, so we do, if we have patients where we know when we speak with them that maybe they were using public transportation before, they want to get back to work, we will spend a community outing getting them on public transportation, you know, just kind of a very initial navigation of the system, just so they can see what it's like kind of with their new situation. If it's something they're going to continue to do, you know, maybe we would refer them to Nathan and outpatient therapy. That's something they may address further, but we try to get a lot of patients on a community outing, so they may be taking just our accessible van to maybe a museum or someplace else in Washington, D.C. But we do have, on occasion, the time where we do take individuals actually on our bus system and our metro system as part of the community outing.
Great, thanks. Another question that someone asked is, would you suggest that someone with a power wheelchair not go out in rain or snow? They've had, I guess, a few times where people have canceled before because of the rain or the snow. So would you suggest that?
I think it depends. You have to be very careful with some of the electrical parts of your power wheelchair. So I know sometimes when we've even hosted events at NRH, if the weather is really bad, we do have individuals cancel. Sometimes there may be situations where they actually end up using one of our, what we call here in Washington, D.C., Metro Access, or in some places it's called paratransit, because they don't have to go outside. I've also have seen individuals, if they're in a power wheelchair, they have covers for their joystick area of their power chair to help protect some of the electrical pieces of their power chair.
Great. So now I think this one's directed towards you. Someone did ask, can you explain what a peer mentor is? In the role that you do.
Yeah, sure. So as a peer mentor, I visit with new patients in particular who are getting ready to kind of reintegrate back into the community after their injury and with, you know, whatever their new disability is, particularly spinal cord injuries. So at National Rehab Hospital, I'm kind of matched up with patients who are interested in having someone like me come in as a peer mentor and talk with them about really anything they would like to talk about as it relates to being discharged and kind of getting back to life as they knew it before their injury.
Great, thanks. There's another question that asks, besides therapy, can you suggest some activities or places in the community that people may go for resources or to get some help?
Shaz, you may have some suggestions too, but I also know, you know, in DC we have some adaptive sports that people get involved in maybe after they leave therapy, to just kind of stay involved with different activities, trying new things, seeing if they like different things. So more of kind of that recreation, leisure activity path to be involved and meet new people. I don't know if you have anything to add, Chanel, related to stuff outside of just therapy.
Yeah, I would mention the same thing, just any adaptive sports or recreation groups that maybe in your city. Most big cities and areas do have such groups. And so that's a great way to meet people and interact and, you know, stay active. And there are some adaptive gym programs that are on the rise, which is also very good because, as we know, most gyms are not accessible. And so that's another great way to kind of work out from your chair and still stay active and not just rely on therapy, or when therapy's over, you still have a means to get a good workout.
Also here at NRH, they recently have started on Saturday some adaptive weightlifting classes, exercise classes that they have on Saturday and Thursday evening. So if you check, depending on where you live, maybe your local rehabilitation hospital or you know, someplace local to you may have some sort of activity that could provide, you know, extra activity outside of your therapy or when it's over.
Great, thanks. So there's a few more questions here. Someone did ask that they have a small bus system in their area, and when they make bus connections or when the bus connection announcements are off, the bus driver must assume or make a verbal query to the passengers and riders about where their connections are. So looking for a suggestion of what would be a reasonable way to question riders who may be deaf or hard of hearing about their connecting buses or their route. Do you guys have any suggestions for that?
Kristen?
But, sorry, I missed part of the question. So just knowing any adaptations for people with visual impairments or hearing impairments?
So it's for specifically people who are deaf or hard of hearing, when they're making bus connections and the bus announcements are off. Sometimes bus drivers have to ask people kind of where they're going or what their connections are, especially in smaller cities or smaller towns.
Okay.
So someone wants to know if there's a reasonable accommodation that you think can be made for that.
I'm trying to think what would be, yeah, because not everyone, you know, was always, you know, proficient in sign language. I don't know if they have any sort of, I guess the smaller towns like in DC, sometimes they have a visual thing like board or whatever on the bus. I don't know if some of the, just to make it more accessible to all individuals in the city. So I don't know if the smaller town, if they have any sort of visual system to help communicate where the next stops are, if they have even like a whiteboard that the bus driver can write down what the next stop is and it's on the front of the bus. just to be able to, in the event that the system is broken down, they can communicate that information.
Sure, great. And I do want to make an announcement. So we do actually have a specific deaf and hard of hearing webinar that we will have later. I'm looking up the date right now. I'm sorry, I don't have it, but I will have it for you within, actually I can tell you right now. So actually on Wednesday, September 9th, that webinar is actually going to be geared towards deaf and hard of hearing population. So our presenter then might have a little bit more, but yeah, great suggestion, Kristen, with the whiteboard or some way to write those things down. We do have another question here. It is, what, if any, technologies do you use with patients and folks when training and planning with them? This person says they use Google Maps quite a bit, but are there other technologies that may help people use their public transit systems and make the experience easier?
I know, I mean, at least a lot of major public transportation systems all have apps related to their public transportation system. So in DC, we have apps that will tell you like when trains are coming. It may tell you about elevator outages. It talks about train outages, all through their apps. Also too, I mean, I grew up on Long Island, and the Long Island Railroad also has a website and an app that you could always access if you were on the train to see what was going on. Again, any delays, outages, disruptions, things like that. So always good to look to see if your system has some sort of app, so you can kind of get that on time. You can access it anywhere if you're able to access your phone, if you have a smartphone, to get that information. Otherwise, Google Maps is great. Really just looking up any information ahead of time, looking on the computer or calling the system to check elevator outages, things like that.
Now, anything to add to that one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so in DC, they, along with the WMATA app that we have there, if you look online, there actually is an ADA number that goes to the main switchboard at the metro system here. And if you have a question about accessibility around the train station or even for a particular bus stop, in most cases, the person who picks up that call will be able to tell you that information. For instance, if you are traveling out in the suburbs by bus, a lot of bus stops actually are in the middle of like a grassy, area, which makes it hard in a wheelchair to maneuver, or the bus stops are placed really poorly, like in a median even. So if you get off at that bus stop, you would have no way to get off the curb if you aren't proficient in jumping curbs in a wheelchair. So details like that, the person at the end of that telephone line, for the most part, is able to find that information for you or have that information for traveling accessibility-wise.
Great, thanks. And we're going to do one more quick question here, and that'll be the last one then. Someone did ask, are there any suggestions for a travel trainer working with a student that has a brand new mobility device that they are not yet comfortable using?
So suggestions for using the new mobility device?
Correct, yeah. For a travel trainer who's not necessarily, a therapist or someone specifically trained in mobility devices, how can we help individuals that have new mobility devices to navigate and use those?
I think, one thing is important, for the individual and our new mobility device, for example, if they have a power chair, just kind of knowing certain things about their chair so that they can pass that information along to you. So if you guys were stuck in any sort of situation, you could assist them. So for example, in a power chair, if for some reason the battery dies or something with the power portion of it doesn't work, knowing that they could tell you as a travel trainer, oh, my chair, you can push this chair. It's heavy, but that you could then, flip the brakes in the back and you'd be able to push this individual in their power chair. So now you're not just like stuck somewhere in the city without being able to get anywhere. So, I think it's important for, even if someone is new to their mobility device, still having either themselves or some sort of caregiver knowing at least the basics of their mobility device, so that then you as a travel trainer, as you're trying to teach them to get around the city, they can help you learn about their chair and assist them as they need it.
Yeah, I think it's also important that to kind of note that if that person does have a therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, somebody that they're currently working with or have worked with recently, you can also ask that person, or maybe even the wheelchair vendor, the company that they purchased the wheelchair through or the mobility device through. That might be, I guess, an option as well to ask them about any features or special things.
Yes.
Great. All right, so I think that's going to be the close of our presentation. We are about a minute or two over, sorry about that, but thank you for your participation today. We hope that you continue to join us for the next webinar series. The next one is actually August 26th. We are skipping August 12th because we do have the Association of Travel Instruction Conference that's being held in Boston, so we will skip next week, the next presentation, and go to August 26th. If you have any questions, you can always email Kristen or Chanel, or you can email myself as well. If you haven't already, please sign up at mtm-inc.net for the next presentation. We would like to thank Kristen and Chanel, and thanks everybody, and have a great day.